Ethan Carter had once been the kind of man everyone wanted to know. As the founder and CEO of one of the country's largest technology companies, he was constantly surrounded by investors, celebrities, politicians, and business leaders. His calendar was filled months in advance with meetings, interviews, charity galas, and exclusive parties. Every room he entered seemed to stop and notice him. Newspapers called him a visionary. Magazines listed him among the most influential entrepreneurs in the nation. To the outside world, Ethan appeared to have everything: wealth, success, respect, and power. But life has a way of changing everything in a single moment. 5 years earlier, Ethan's life had been turned upside down after a devastating car accident. A speeding truck lost control during a storm and crashed into his vehicle. Ethan survived, but the injuries to his spine left him permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors did everything they could, yet there was no miracle. He would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. The physical pain was difficult, but it wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was watching people disappear. The business partners who once insisted on taking him to expensive dinners suddenly became too busy to answer his calls. Friends who had spent every weekend at his mansion slowly stopped visiting. Invitations to exclusive events stopped arriving. Even some relatives drifted away after realizing Ethan was no longer the energetic man they had always depended on. His mansion, once filled with laughter and conversations, became painfully quiet. Every morning Ethan rolled himself through hallways decorated with priceless artwork and expensive furniture, yet the silence echoed louder than any voice. His assistants came and went. Housekeepers cleaned every room. Chefs prepared gourmet meals. But none of them stayed longer than necessary. Money could hire service. It couldn't buy companionship. The loneliness became even worse after his wife left 2 years after the accident. She admitted she couldn't handle the emotional weight of the new life they faced together. Their divorce was respectful, but it left Ethan completely alone. At first, he buried himself in work. He attended board meetings through video calls. He approved company decisions from his home office. He expanded the business even further. His fortune continued to grow. Ironically, the richer he became, the emptier his life felt. As his 50th birthday approached, Ethan found himself thinking about the celebrations he used to host. Hundreds of guests would fill luxury hotels. Famous singers performed. Champagne flowed freely. Expensive gifts arrived by the dozens. Those parties had never really been about him. They had been about his influence. Still, a small part of him hoped things might be different this year. His personal assistant, Melissa, suggested organizing a simple birthday gathering at one of the company's event halls. "We'll invite everyone," she said. "Board members, executives, old friends, business partners. I'm sure many will come." Ethan smiled faintly. "I hope you're right." Invitations were sent weeks in advance. Nearly everyone responded. Most checked the box marked attending. For the first time in months, Ethan felt excited. He imagined reconnecting with old friends. Sharing stories. Laughing together. Perhaps his loneliness had finally come to an end. The day of the celebration arrived. The ballroom looked magnificent. Fresh flowers decorated every table. Soft piano music played through hidden speakers. Golden lights reflected from crystal chandeliers. A massive birthday cake stood proudly in the center of the room with elegant silver letters reading, "Happy 50th birthday, Ethan." Everything looked perfect. Except for one thing. No guests. At first, Ethan wasn't worried. People often arrived fashionably late. 5 minutes passed. Then 15. Then 30. Melissa checked her phone repeatedly. "The traffic must be terrible," she said, forcing a smile. Another 20 minutes passed. Her phone finally rang. She answered. "I understand." She hung up quietly. "Mr. Carter, one of the board members won't make it." Something came up. A few minutes later another message arrived. Then another. And another. Each one carried a different excuse. Family emergency. Business meeting. Flight delayed. Not feeling well. Some didn't bother giving any reason at all. They simply never appeared. By evening, nearly every chair remained empty. The musicians packed away their instruments. The catering staff whispered among themselves. Even they felt sorry for the lonely man sitting beside the untouched birthday cake. Melissa looked heartbroken. "I'm so sorry." Ethan forced a smile. "It's all right." But it wasn't. He stared across hundreds of empty seats. Years earlier, people had fought for invitations to his parties. Now they couldn't spare a single hour. For the first time in many years, Ethan allowed himself to cry. Not because he was turning 50. Not because he was paralyzed. But because he finally understood something he had spent years refusing to believe. Many of the people who surrounded him had never cared about him at all. They cared about what he could do for them. His money. His influence. His connections. When those became less useful, so did he. He quietly asked Melissa to thank the staff and send everyone home. "I'll stay a little longer." She hesitated. "I don't think you should be alone." "I'll be fine." Reluctantly, she nodded and left. The enormous ballroom became silent. Only the ticking of the wall clock remained. Ethan looked at the birthday cake. 50 candles. None of them lit. He whispered to himself. "Happy birthday." His own words echoed through the empty hall. He reached toward the cake, intending to wheel himself out and end the painful evening. Then, just as he reached the doorway, he heard soft footsteps. A little girl's voice echoed from the hallway. "Daddy, is he still here?" Ethan looked up in surprise. Standing at the entrance was Noah, the building's maintenance worker, wearing his faded work uniform after finishing a long shift. Beside him stood his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, carefully carrying a tiny homemade cake decorated with uneven frosting and colorful sprinkles. Noah looked embarrassed as he stepped inside. "Mr. Carter," he said quietly, "we heard, no one came." Emma smiled shyly and held up the little cake. "I told Daddy that birthdays are supposed to have people, not empty chairs." For the first time that evening, Ethan forgot about the empty ballroom. He simply stared at the father and daughter standing before him, unaware that this small act of kindness was about to change all three of their lives forever. Noah stood quietly at the entrance, feeling slightly out of place in his worn maintenance uniform. His work boots were dusty, and his hands still carried traces of grease from repairing equipment throughout the building. Beside him, 8-year-old Emma carefully held a small homemade cake in both hands. It wasn't perfectly round. The frosting was uneven, and the colorful sprinkles had been scattered by a child's excited fingers. To most people, it looked ordinary. To Ethan Carter, it was the most beautiful birthday cake he had ever seen. Emma walked toward him with a bright smile. "Happy birthday, Mr. Carter." Her cheerful voice echoed through the nearly empty ballroom. Ethan looked at the little cake, then at the hundreds of untouched desserts prepared by professional chefs. None of those expensive cakes meant anything anymore. This tiny homemade one meant everything. "Thank you," Ethan whispered, struggling to control his emotions. Emma placed the cake gently on the table. "My daddy and I made it together. I hope you like chocolate." Ethan laughed softly. "I love chocolate." For the first time that evening, the room felt warm instead of empty. Noah looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry for coming without an invitation. We were leaving after my shift when Emma asked why so many decorations were still here. One of the waiters told us everyone had cancelled." Emma looked up at her father. "I told Daddy nobody should have to celebrate a birthday alone." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "You were absolutely right." Emma clapped her hands excitedly. "Then let's sing." Without waiting for permission, she began singing "Happy Birthday" with the joyful confidence only a child possesses. Her father joined in a second later. Their voices weren't perfectly in tune. There was no orchestra. No famous singer. Just two genuine hearts celebrating a lonely man. When the song ended, Ethan closed his eyes before blowing out the candles on the homemade cake. For the first time in years, he didn't wish for more money or business success. He wished for people who truly cared. The three of them spent the next few hours talking. They ignored the luxurious buffet and instead shared slices of Emma's little cake. Ethan asked about her school. She proudly showed him drawings from her backpack. One picture showed her holding hands with her father under a bright yellow sun. "My teacher said I draw happy pictures," Emma said. "You certainly do," Ethan replied. As the evening continued, Noah shared pieces of his own story. He explained that his wife had passed away from cancer 3 years earlier. Since then, he had worked 3 different jobs to support Emma. During the day he delivered groceries. In the evening he worked as a maintenance employee. On weekends he repaired appliances for neighbors. "I don't mind working," Noah said. "I just want Emma to have opportunities one never had." Emma interrupted with a smile. "My daddy says being together is more important than being rich." Ethan lowered his eyes. "I wish I had learned that much sooner." When it was finally time to leave, Noah stood up. "We should go. You've already given us enough of your time." Ethan shook his head. "No." He smiled warmly. "You gave me the greatest birthday I've had in years." Noah looked confused. "We didn't bring anything expensive. You brought yourselves." Those words hung in the air. As Noah and Emma walked toward the exit, Emma suddenly turned around and ran back. She hugged Ethan as tightly as she could. "Don't be lonely anymore, okay?" Ethan hugged her back. "I'll try." After they left, the ballroom felt quiet again. But it no longer felt empty. For the first time in years, Ethan slept peacefully. The next morning he asked his assistant, Melissa, to learn everything she could about Noah. A week later she returned with a file. "You should read this." Inside were employment records, financial statements, and personal references. Ethan discovered Noah earned barely enough to pay rent. Despite working 3 jobs, he often skipped meals so Emma could eat better. Teachers described him as one of the most devoted parents they had ever met. Neighbors reported that he regularly fixed elderly residents' broken appliances without charging them. One comment caught Ethan's attention. "If Noah has $10 and someone else needs 11, he'll find a way to give them 12. Ethan closed the folder. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. The following Monday, every employee received an invitation to a company meeting. People expected another business announcement. Instead, Ethan rolled onto the stage and smiled. "A week ago," he began, "I celebrated the loneliest birthday of my life." The room became silent. Out of hundreds of invited guests, only one employee and his daughter came. Everyone looked toward Noah, who sat in the back, completely unaware of what was happening. "They didn't come because I was their CEO. They came because they believed no person deserves to celebrate alone." Ethan paused. "In business we often reward talent. Today, I'm rewarding character." He invited Noah onto the stage. With shaking hands, Noah walked forward. "I'm appointing you Director of Community Relations." The audience gasped. Ethan continued. "Your job won't be based on financial numbers. It will be based on reminding this company that people matter more than profits." The applause lasted several minutes. Then Ethan made another announcement. He established the Emma Carter Scholarship Fund, named after the little girl whose kindness had transformed his life. The program would pay for the education of children being raised by single parents employed by the company. He also introduced paid family leave, grief counseling, and emergency financial assistance for struggling workers. Within months, the company changed. Employees no longer felt invisible. Managers listened. Families came first. Productivity increased because people finally felt valued instead of merely employed. As for Ethan, he found something even more valuable than success. Every Sunday, Noah and Emma visited his home. They cooked together, watched movies, and celebrated birthdays, holidays, and ordinary afternoons as if they were family. The mansion that had once echoed with silence slowly filled with laughter. One evening Emma looked at Ethan and asked, "Can I call you Grandpa Ethan?" He smiled through tears. "I would love that. Sometimes life doesn't send miracles wrapped in wealth or fame. Sometimes they arrive carrying a homemade cake, wearing worn-out work boots, and holding the hand of a little girl who simply believes that no one should ever be alone on their birthday." That forgotten birthday became the beginning of a new family, proving that kindness can heal wounds that even time cannot. Ethan had spent years searching for happiness in success, but he finally found it in the hearts of two ordinary people who expected nothing in return. And from that day on, he never celebrated another birthday alone.